Hi, I'm Mike Antonacci, and I'm here to help you become the hero God is calling you to be. Today's video is another one in my series on a look into my prayer life. What is my prayer sometimes like? Keyword sometimes. This is not what it is all the time. It shouldn't be an expectation you have that it looks like this all the time. Really important, just wanted to say that. So as part of my prayer every day, I will read through that day's mass readings and then see what stands out. Pray with one of the readings, usually a lot more in depth. So from Wednesday, Genesis 41, this is late on in Joseph. So here's the context of all of it. So Israel, Jacob, same guy, just different name, had 12 sons, and one of them, Joseph, had a lot of dreams. You may be familiar with him as Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And the other sons, so Joseph's brothers, are really jealous of Joseph. So they're just like, we are sick of this guy, let's kill him. So they throw him in a well, an empty well. And then later they're like, I don't know if we should actually kill him, but hey, look, there's some slave traders. Let's just sell him into slavery instead. So they do. And then, they take his coat and dip it in some animal's blood. And so his father assumes, okay, he must have been torn apart by wild beasts. I'm not going to see him again. And then so Joseph ends up in Egypt and then gets this reputation of being very wise and be able to interpret dreams. Eventually, and keyword eventually, he spends like 17 years in prison because one of the people's wives tries to seduce him, and Joseph's like, so runs out, and she falsely accuses him. Anyway, so this is after that. Pharaoh is like, I had this dream, what's going on? And Joseph says, hey, it means we're going to have 7 years of lots of grain and food and stuff. And then we're going to have 7 years of famine. So let's save up now so that way we don't all die. And so he does. So by the time we're in Genesis 41, which is the reading that I was praying with, the famine is already in full swing. And so Joseph is actually second only to Pharaoh. He's in charge of distributing the grain rations to everybody. And the famine starts in Egypt, but eventually is more of the world. And so other people are coming to Joseph to buy grain rations, including his brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery. So as we get to this part, the brothers, they don't recognize Joseph because they never expected to see him again. And also he's Egyptian now and he's talking through a translator. And so at this point, the brothers are thinking, okay, we're being punished because of how we treated Joseph, because Joseph accused them of being spies and said, I'm going to leave one of you in prison. The rest of you have to go back, bring your youngest brother back, and then I'll know you're actually not spies. And the brothers are like, we can't do that because our father, he had 2 sons by that wife. And then the oldest one, which is Joseph, is dead. So he dotes on the younger one. If we bring him and he doesn't come back, then we're going to send him to his death in grief. So anyway, they're anguished and they're saying we're being punished for how we treated Joseph. I'm going to read specifically the part of the passage that stood out. And I do it on my phone because that's what I have when I'm praying as I pull up the readings on my phone. So, alas, we are being punished because of our brother. We saw the anguish of his heart when he pleaded with us, yet we paid him no heed. This is why this anguish has now come upon us. So I'd read through that reading and that line specifically stood out. And so I just imagined what that scene would have been like. Joseph at the bottom of this empty well, pleading with his brothers to let him go. And the brothers ignoring him and seeing how much, anger, rage, envy, etc. twisted the brothers so that they would do something, really bad. But as I'm imagining the scene, I'm on one of the brothers being mad at Joseph and watching him plead and just ignoring that. And then almost immediately the connection was to Jesus, that when I sin, I'm betraying Jesus. I'm selling Jesus into slavery when in fact I should be for what I'm doing. And yet, God has worked good through that. Joseph ends up in Egypt in charge of the grain when there's a famine. And so as people come to him giving that grain, he is giving them life. And so Jesus also gives us his life through, we've betrayed him and everything, but he's giving us his life. And a connection I made later was that Joseph's giving out grain, Jesus is the bread of life. He gives us himself in the Eucharist. So even though we've betrayed him and have done bad things for him, Jesus, like Joseph, does not hold it against his brothers. Jesus, like Joseph, does not kill his brothers, refuse to give them grain, whatever. Jesus, like Joseph, sees that what was done to him was bad, but he is able to work good from it. So there's a really cool connection in prayer. And as I said in the beginning, not all of my prayer times look like this. I don't expect them to look like this. You shouldn't expect yours to look like this. If it does, sweet, that's awesome. Because really, your prayer is measured not by the gifts that you were given from God, but by did you show up? Because really, prayer is primarily God's work in you. And so if you're showing up, you're able to better receive that. That is the one measure of if your prayer is good, not did you feel good or not? Because guess what? It's not the job of your feelings to come to the truth. That's the job of your brain, of your intellect. Your feelings might be wrong. Sometimes your feelings lie to you because something can feel not true, but is still actually true. So, feelings can be helpful. They can point to certain things, but their job is not to come to truth. Same with prayer. If you didn't feel great in prayer, that's not the measure of it. P.S. Be a hero today. Okay, so some of you have mentioned that you didn't know I had a website and a blog. They're actually the same thing. So if you want to get written posts, I have that there. At the bottom left of your screen, when it becomes the end screen, is a link to the website, and you can see what are other things that I talk about. Also, if you want a guide to prayer, I have an ebook called Save the World. It's the Nerd's Guide to Evangelization. And one of the earlier chapters is on prayer. And so I outline a brief how do you pray with scripture, because that's what I do pretty regularly. That's, like I said, one of the early chapters. It's very easy to find it on my website, like pretty much on any page in the top right. It'll say sign up for your ebook or something like that. So head on over there, check it out, and thank you for watching.